Heyo, and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be giving some thoughts on The Chosen. I have not watched it consistently in a very long time. I really haven't seen any of season 3, but I randomly watched an episode at a youth group I went to and gave me some thoughts. And they don't feel super insightful or thought-provoking because it's even something that I've had the notion of before. Just watching it play out, it hit a little different, and it just made me see it a little more clearly and feel that a little more strongly, and so I just wanted to share that. This particular episode of The Chosen was the story of how Jesus goes to the synagogue and teaches from the scroll of Isaiah, God has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted and declare release from darkness for prisoners and stuff like that. And then he's like, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And everyone gets really mad because they're like, this is the guy that we grew up with, and the whole thing of like a prophet is without honor only in his own hometown. And I don't know, it was just really interesting and really powerful seeing that, like seeing Jesus, coming back home and interacting with all of these old friends, and it's these people that have only known him as the carpenter's son and someone that they grew up with and played with and went to school with, and just how hard it would have been for them to accept that he is the Messiah, even like the Son of God, because that's a whole step further. It'd be hard enough to believe that he was the promised one, but to be saying these things that literally sound like heresy, and they're like, wow, we just have to kill you for claiming this because we know you and we know that you can't be the Son of God, like we grew up with you. And it was just this really powerful reminder of what it can be like growing up in the church and growing up with Jesus kind of in that same way, hearing about him since you were little and having him portrayed to you in a certain way, and hearing all the little tamed down Sunday school stories about him, and all of these, I don't know, like churchy phrases without really quite experiencing what they mean. And you can grow up with Jesus and grow up hearing that he is the Messiah and the Son of God, unlike these people did, but it can be that same thing of completely missing his heart and not understanding who he truly is because of having heard so much about him and seeing things in whatever certain way you were raised. That's just super interesting and powerful to me, because I'm like, wow, there are so many people that, like, if they came face to face with the real Jesus, they wouldn't know him. Because all churches and all Christian parents, they do their best, but there are things that they miss and that they misconstrue, things that they convey the wrong way, things that they don't think to emphasize the way that some people need. And so as good of a job as they can do, there's still going to be some holes and some flaws in that. Just like your parents try, but no one's parents are perfect. And there are some ways that they're just going to have hurt you or missed you or done things wrong. And so no matter how much they try, there are going to be these things that we just don't understand about God. And I think that's why it's so interesting and so good to be in fellowship with a lot of other believers, so you can get that picture from everyone else, because I feel like everyone in a way kind of holds their own little piece and their own little perspective that's their personal experience with God that we need, so that as we come together as the bride of Christ, we're piecing together this picture of who God actually is. And that's why it's so valuable to share with each other our testimonies and our experiences. But anyway, all that to say that there are going to be these things that we don't understand about Jesus, and so some people who have said that they believed in him or followed him, coming face to face with who he actually is, they won't know who he is and they won't recognize him. They would be either like, heresy, shut that down, they're preaching wrong things about the Jesus that I know, or coming face to face with the Jesus who demands them to lay down their life for him, to pick up their cross and follow him, and they would say, no, like, I don't believe that you are the Son of God and the one that I would follow. No, I would rather follow something else. And they would walk away from him. Whereas if we really understood and knew who he was, how could we ever turn away from him? I read Beautiful Outlaw by John Eldridge, which was a really, really good book, kind of going through the Gospels and explaining, I don't know, a more like real perspective of Jesus and trying to understand like his personality and stuff, which helps make the Gospels make a lot more sense. But at the beginning, there's this little prayer that he asks you to pray throughout the book as you're, considering new perspectives and interpreting things in different ways. Just keep your heart open with this prayer of like, Jesus, I want to know you. I want to know the real you. And just this heart of trying to discover who God actually is, and accepting in humility that there are some things that we will have misunderstood, that we won't have the proper perspective on, that we don't have it right. But we're seeking God to reveal himself to us. And that was super interesting and super powerful, and just made me have this hunger to understand who Jesus really is. It made me go back to reading the Gospels, which I really hadn't emphasized very much, because I was like, that's what I read all the time and heard all the time in church. I know them. I'd read other parts of the Bible. And I've been able to go back to the Gospels and like really look at Jesus and try to understand who he is and what made his walk on earth important and what makes his ministry important. And it's been so refreshing and so good and so life-giving. And so just watching that Chosen episode, it really hurt to think that I could be like that I could see Jesus and not really see him and reject him because I think that I know who he is from having grown up with him and having heard about him in this specific way and seen him in this specific way and had him taught to me in this specific way, but that I'm not open to him being different from that. And I think if we don't have that humility, we set ourselves up for so much danger. Like, first of all, we can make other Christians our enemy that have a slightly different perspective on stuff and be like, no, I have all the perfectly correct theology and you were wrong, instead of understanding that God is so much bigger than that, and there are some things that we each might have a piece of the actual picture, and our brains right now can't see how it fits together, like with the Trinity. Like understanding that God's three people and one person, we say that, but we don't really know what it means, and I don't think we'll really know what that means until heaven, but we can be content with just, well, this is what we see in the Bible, and this is what we believe, and we don't fully understand it, don't 100% know how to explain it or know how it works, but you just have to take it on faith. Anyway, so that we could be turning against each other and making our brothers and sisters in Christ our enemies over that, or that there will be these times in our lives, like I've had this, people who are so strong in their faith and have pursued God with such a genuine heart have had this. I feel like this is just something that is probably going to come to everyone, but this moment where you feel like God is not who you thought he was, and your whole worldview, paradigm shift, it's just everything is shaken, and you're trying to understand. If you're not prepared for that or don't at all expect that to happen, and think that the God that has always been taught to you, that you've always sought and learned and pursued, is exactly who you thought he was, that's just going to be really hard. And it's going to take a lot of time to work through, or you're just completely going to walk away and lose your faith entirely. I think it's so important to be ready for those seasons and also to welcome them when they come, because we want to understand who God actually is. And we don't want to be walking around blind or only looking at this tiny piece of the picture and be content with that. And I know that there are going to be times down the road where I'm going to be questioning what I've learned and questioning who he is and feeling like I had an integral piece missing this entire time, and where was it and how do I fit this all together. But he's faithful, he's good, and we know that he is the same yesterday and today and forever. And I don't ever want to be content with just one little picture of him, and I don't want to refuse to ever consider anything else or see him in any other way than the way that I've always been brought up seeing him, or always enjoyed seeing him the most, or been most content to see him, because I want to know the real Jesus, and I want to know God for who he actually is, and not just the God that I want him to be. I want to serve him. I don't want to serve my own little illusion or my own little idol that I accidentally set up in place of him. And thank goodness he wants to be known. He wants to reveal himself to us. He's not just going to leave us in the dark about who he is and how he acts and how he operates and how he feels about us. But I just feel like it can be very difficult to approach that humbly, and I was really challenged and reminded by this episode that that is a very important perspective to have. It's really critical for me to have that humility in my heart and to remember what my focus actually is. It's not that I stay where I am forever or try to nail down all of the perfect theology. The point is that I get to know God, and I want to know who he actually is and all of the pain and all of the delights that that uncovers. I want to pursue him for who he actually is. And I want to be sure that I have actually followed God and actually known God. And all of these experiences that I've had with him are experiences from my God who loves me and who I love. Thank you for watching, and goodbye until more interesting things happen.